Hello, and welcome to the Poet Minor Podcast. I'm your host, Poet Minor. The topic for today's podcast is how to navigate trauma for healing. And the person who will help us navigate this topic is Joe Sivoli. Joe Sivoli is a certified recovery peer specialist and is the founder and executive director of Beacon Health Incorporated, located here in Florida. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you. Well, thank you, poet. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I only know a little bit about your story growing up in your childhood with trauma and child abuse. So could you take us a little bit back there to what happened?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So, my story is probably similar to many stories, right? Every story is sort of personal to the individual. But in my case, I was raised out in Hawthorne, California, born to a mom and a dad. And at around 7 years old, they got a divorce. And, after that divorce, dad moved out of state and mom, who suffered from borderline personality disorder, most likely not diagnosed, but
Mhm.
pretty confident at this age that's probably what it was. Um, started to raise his kids and then include these very toxic people in the house, like her boyfriend's partners, people that she would choose. She never learned to choose good people.
Mhm.
So really the trauma for me was from 7 o'clock on. There was never a safe time in the house, like all the way up through high school. Just constant abuse, constant drama, chaos, people doing drugs, physical abuse, emotional abuse. I witnessed the sexual assault of my sister several times. It was just a really not a great place to live or grow up or nurture a child. So that was really kind of how my life started. I was a very empathic kid though, right? Super sweet. Some of the pictures you should see, like they're just super, they're super adorable. But that kid, that really soft, empathic kid, was put in the middle of all of this craziness with no real tools on how to cope. And so that was how I sort of began life here on this earth.
Yeah. But how did you and your sister navigate that life?
Well, there was a lot of a lot of gaslighting for ourselves, right, and others, right? So certainly, when you're young, you learn not to bring up the bad things, right? Because those trigger the adult. If you said something very, like children do, like, why is this happening? Or, mom, why are you drinking again? Those would be triggers and there would be physical punishments that would follow. So you kind of learn early on not to speak up or not to say the wrong thing. And you had to learn kind of that survival skill first. And then later on, as we interact with other people, or interact or as I interacted with other people, I could tell a difference in how my family was and how their families were. And so then you learn this like inner dialogue of excuses, right? Like, well, this happened because of this special situation with mom, but we're really like that, right? And so you kind of, in two ways, you learn to not approach the actual issue and you learn to make excuses for the bad behavior so that you can grow up thinking that you're near loving supportive family members, right, and you could feel safe even though all the while really never feeling safe. So yeah, it was a difficult time.
So you had like two personalities?
Oh yeah, for sure. There was the Joe that was more me, more who I really felt I was as a person at school, let's say, or around my peers. And then there was the Joe at home. Who just didn't really want to look around him at like the craziness that was going on. Because there was always something crazy, always would be a misstep. There'd always be a punishment for something that you wouldn't have possibly been able to figure out because based on the moods of these toxic people that mom brought in or her own borderline personality disorder.
Okay. So, you're young, you go through the trauma, you're still going through the trauma, and you're coming in to your teens. Now, is
Yeah.
trauma and the drama still in your teens?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what happens, and other, your readers, some of them, they might, relate to this. It sort of always sticks with you until you get it addressed, right? So like until you can process, until you can see a professional, a therapist, a counselor, a supportive I'm not saying it has to be a licensed clinical, whatever, but until you look inside and you address what happened and learn to set boundaries, healthy boundaries with other people, love yourself, forgive yourself, give yourself grace. Until you go through that process, you will always carry those reactions with you. They talk a lot about in our industry. So folks that have gone through that trauma, it affects the nervous system, right? So
Mhm.
especially continued and ongoing trauma. So it builds a path of a nervous reaction. Your heart might race. You might feel unsafe setting a boundary with someone for fear of a physical attack or a verbal rejection. These patterns over time, they kind of build inside, and then what happens is you learn that people don't really want to see that on the outside. So you feel it, but what you're expressing is not in conjunction with what you're feeling. So you learn to have a disconnect with that, to fit in, to be normal, to whatever it is. So absolutely, all through high school and even into college, like I was a loving guy. I am. I mean, we've known each other for a bit. Like
Mhm.
I super care about people, but to cover for that, I would often be very direct. Um, um, Reactive, right? Because if something triggered me, I wouldn't show that it was a trigger. So I would attack verbally. I would use
Yeah.
charged language. I might talk about myself in a negative way, like, oh, you're so dumb, or oh, that was stupid of you, things like that. That's kind of how that manifests. And that once you're kind of sort of older and you're adulting initially, right? You still have to survive in this world. You're working, you're making your money, you have a place to live, but you never dealt with all of this, right? So in order to survive in those worlds, you have to somehow accommodate so that maybe at work you don't get fired, right? Or
Mhm.
you can still keep friends around, right? Yeah, it's really weird for me to look back at those times because like I'm such a different person now and react and take care of myself in such better ways now that yeah, it's hard to remember, but yeah, for sure, a lot of that stuff was happening.
Yeah, I was thinking if you have all of that inside of you and it's affecting your nervous system, so it's affecting your health. Like,
It does, yeah.
you eat differently? Were you obese? Did you have pimples?
Oh, I
Like,
mean,
what was
I
going
was
on?
alternately skinny and overweight. So for me, food was the comfort. I never went to the path most of my family went down, which was to go to drugs.
Mhm.
For me, it was food. And I wasn't, overweight in the sense of obese or very large. But if I'm stressed even today, oh man, I just want something sweet or some comfort food, like it's a really strong urge. But the kinds of foods, we were poor, so that kind of contributed to that mental state. The kinds of foods that we could afford, one, weren't the best quality, and two, often had more sugars and carbohydrates and those things in them, which break down into sugars, and that affects your behavior. That spike of sugar, that energy release, and then the crash. It can affect your mood. It can cause you to be more reactive to people around you, often not think through a thing because you're either hyper or not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was definitely a part of it. And as I got older, one of the things that was for me, the first godsend was in college. I had a good buddy of mine, Jesse, who we would do Taekwondo together. And he was the first person to kind of really get me into like fitness.
Mhm.
And I did notice a change. I mean, it didn't fix everything in here, right? But I noticed a change in my moods and my behavior as I ate better, avoided sugars as much as possible, et cetera. And, finding out eventually that I actually did have sugar issues, that hypoglycemia. So I would eat sugar and it would spike and then I'd crash or fall asleep. Once I, went back to an old eating pattern, it was
Yeah.
super obvious, right? Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, you went to a therapist, and the
I
therapist.
did. Yeah. Yeah. I actually have two, one unfortunate, one amazing therapist story. So initially I went to a therapist when I first moved here to Orlando, and it was after a breakup. Looking back now, not a surprising breakup, right? Because I had somehow very successfully chosen exactly someone that I would have seen growing up as a kid, right? Thinking that was normal. So someone who wasn't present, wasn't looking out for me, was mostly selfish, self-centered, and unavailable. Um, so that had broken up. It was really hurtful because I connect very um, very strongly to people. That's my thing. I'm super empathic, and I really like to connect and see someone's soul, and then I care about them, and I will take care of them like they're my family. Um, but in this case, it was about 5 years, just under 5 years, and this person was not faithful, and all of the things, right? So brokenhearted, and I moved from Milwaukee to Orlando, and I found a therapist when I first moved here, who unfortunately, unbeknownst to me, was a pretty toxic person. So I spent 4 years in therapy with him and his organization. And through that time, I was again gaslighted, presented sort of as a shield to like bring other people in. He turned a therapeutic relationship into a volunteer and a friendship, all while still providing my services, only to find out that what he was actually doing was not consistent with my values.
Mhm.
Um, and he would, based on folks I've talked to afterwards, sort of regularly abused the staff. He had sent some inappropriate photos to the front desk person. He would menace the girls who were doing therapy. He was just looking out what seemed to like to us, just looking out for the money, not
Mhm.
helping the people. And when I started to see those things and sort of kind of, again, I was seeing a therapist. I moved from him then to someone else, and I started to get a little better therapy. And as I started to see those things, I was like, let me just back up a bit, thinking, still making the excuses, right? I want to save the friendship. Let me just
Yeah.
back up from the clinic. And when I did, then I would get sexual based texts, and that freaked me out. So kind of went into hiding for about 2 years. I mean, not real hiding, but never felt safe going outside again. Had all of those same, feelings from when I was a kid, because I had told this person, I was so intimate with him in those sessions, not physically, but emotionally, mentally. He knew everything about me. And only to find out that he wasn't a safe person. And that was really scary to me. So I spent about 2 years kind of, with my friends, but out of the house. I had a disability at the time that was pretty significant. And I finally, after about 2 years, kind of went to a community event for a local politician. Her name's Anna Eskamani. You guys may have heard of her. She's amazing.
Yeah, I looked
Um,
up.
yeah, yeah, she's awesome. But I went to this event because it was a Christmas caroling event.
Mhm.
And, and it always reminded me of good times as a kid. And I liked to sing. And I thought, this is very wholesome. I think this would be safe. So I went to this event, first one, just with new people that I didn't know situation, and fully intending on not saying anything because I figured, I wouldn't be believed anyway. All the things that you tell yourself, right, when you've been abused, and people put things in your mind. So I go, and as the universe would have it, right, we're talking about her high heels. Because that one, she walks everywhere in these high heels. I'm like, it looks, hurtful, Anna. Um, uh, and I was like, I've only worn heels, quote unquote, once, which were platform shoes, really, right?
Mhm.
And I showed her a picture on my phone. I was like, this, and it was so hurtful. I don't know how you do it, Anna. And she's like, oh, where is that? And I was like, oh, and I hadn't thought about it. That was at a fundraiser for that organization that I had left, and that person that had abused me. And I just kind of froze. And I was like, I have a choice. I can just tell the truth, or I can cover it up. And I chose for some reason, because she was just she seemed supportive, right?
Yeah.
I told her a little bit. I said, well, this was at this particular place where I was abused by this particular person. And, I'm not really happy about that place, but the platform shoes are, the one thing that I was talking about. And her and me, and I was waiting for her to, like, dismiss it and, quickly back up, because, she's a politician and she's got to keep her avenues open, all the things that go on
Yeah,
in
you
your
got
head,
all
right?
going around.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all the self-talk. Um, and instead her response was, I believe you. Yeah, I've heard other things about that group. In fact, I voted in a particular venue to restrict them from that group because I think they're not doing something right. I was blown away, right? I was like, oh wow. So I spoke my truth, not as strongly or as loudly as I could have, but a little. And the response was really supportive. And that was when I started to kind of come out of that fear response, that autonomic response that a lot of folks with trauma have, right? And you learn over time how to reduce the timing of that, the space of that, right? But many folks with trauma have this automatic path that happens, that learned nervous system paths from when they were in the danger as a kid. and you have to unlearn going down those same paths as you're an adult because you're not in that same position anymore, really, but your body doesn't know that.
No, I was going to say for those people who don't have Anna Eskamani, is that
Mm-hmm.
her name? Yeah. Just
Yeah.
quickly, she's the Florida House of Representative. For those
Yeah.
who,
For District 42. Yeah.
yeah. But if for those who don't have a representative, what can they do when they're in that in the predicament of being traumatized and abused? Because you had
Sure.
steps that you did. What could they
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. I did. So that was the first step, right? I went to the therapist. I thought I was getting the help. I wasn't really helping. I had that incident, talked to Anna, and I said, you know what? I need to redouble down on my therapy, right? And so I went back, but I chose a different trauma trained therapist. And if you're at all possible, right? Most therapists can handle anxiety, be it PTSD, depression, they can handle that. But having a trauma trained therapist was really significant and helpful for me because they were able to explain to me those what I just mentioned, that pathway in the nervous system. You learn to accept and love yourself for, it is what it is. You didn't do it to yourself, it was done to you, right? So now you live kind of like if you have to live with a backpack on your back, right? You figure out how to adjust the weight or maybe learn how to release the straps, whatever. You have to make a change now as you interact with folks, and as you live your life to reduce that effect of that trauma on your current body or current system. And that to me takes someone at least trained on some level, right? A therapist, a counselor, a peer recovery specialist, right? A peer counselor. um, and for me it was just huge. It was huge. I was like eyes wide open. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not crazy. I don't have borderline personality like my mom, right? All the things you tell yourself. No, I was just a child that was raised with trauma in an unsafe environment, who had nervous system pathways burnt into his body for instances of being unsafe and abuse and just horrendous things that a child should never see. And so as an adult, and as I move forward with my life, and your audience members, would agree, hopefully, if they've experienced this, um, you learn how to minimize the time that you're in that state, because the state is always there. It's waiting to come out. It's burned in your body, right? And so when it happens, it's learning how to recognize when it's happening, stop, pull back, give yourself space, go to the bathroom, wash your face, leave the party, whatever it is, right? Get to a space where you feel safe and talk to yourself, talk yourself through, this is what's happening. Let it go through your, do what you need. Maybe sometimes people journal. Some
Yeah,
people find, solace in talking to someone else that they truly trust. For some people, they just need a hug to make themselves feel safe. Um, a weighted blanket, heating pad, anything that kind of gets your body out of that autonomic reaction. And the more you, and also meditation and praying and going to church, all of these things that get yourself out of looking inside and focusing on that and externalizing that, right? Getting your focus out of that so that you can kind of be a third party observer and say, oh, this is what's happening to me. Darn the trauma response. Okay, let's breathe. Let's lean into it. Let's let it out. Let's let it run its course and it'll be done. And the great thing about doing that, now this is over years. I mean, this didn't happen right away, but over the course of the 3 or 4 years I've been in therapy, those moments used to take weeks. I would have a low, more and more aggressive and then low level version of that. Now it's maybe an hour or two, if that gets triggered, right? And it gets triggered less and less. So it's possible. It's totally possible to live a life where that is less common and not doesn't rule your life. It may not be forever gone, right? Because you've got paths burned into you, right? But it's okay to know that you're still loved and you're still amazing and you were created beautifully, and you can accept yourself for who you are and surround yourself with the people that love and accept you for who you are exactly as you are right now, and live an amazing life, much different than what you would have thought had you not gone to therapy, had you not gone to a counselor, had you not looked into those things that you could do to help alleviate some of your pain.
yeah. And you're not alone. You probably
And
thought
you're not
you were
alone.
alone when you were going through it.
100% right. And the what do you say? Like it's easier to believe you're alone in those first moments because that trigger, the neural pathways, they're already burned, right? So the responses are real quick, like, oh, I got to deal with this alone. Oh, there's no one that will help me. Oh, what do I do? Oh, I'm helpless. Oh, like, and they all kind of tie together. And learning how to break those sequences is really amazing. The opening of the clinic came. So as I came out of that, anescomani experience and that horrible situation with that previous therapist, I was really motivated to start fighting back, right? Like, so then I got a little bit angry, um, uh, for myself in protection of the person that was, hurt by those folks.
Yeah.
And so then I did get the courage to stand up. I reported this person to the board, the correctional board that's associated to his license. They spent 2 years fighting that, ended up winning that case, and his license was censured, and I think that's what they call it. They basically wrote something on it, and then they fined him a total of like $6,000 to $8,000 for various things, and forced him to take a professional ethics and boundaries training class.
Awesome.
And I was able to face him in that class, like in that process, right? So when they have the hearing, I was able to go and face him and just see how different it was now, like after the therapy and after I had become more strong, and just to see how like I would never have connected with this person knowing what I know now, right? So that was really freeing. And from that moment, and with the new therapy that I had started, I thought, gosh, like if this particular person who was running at the time one of the largest LGBTQ clinics in the city, if he could do the thing, I could certainly do it. I was there helping him on some of it anyway, IT wise. And I would do it with the values and the love that I have in my heart, right? So I wanted to make it a very ethical clinic, focused on those in our community who are, have the least access to care, who might have been in similar situations, raised in traumatic households and never felt safe, or stuck, especially in our community, right? Maybe they have family, but family that doesn't support them, and they don't feel like they're loved and accepted. So I wanted to make a clinic that would move forward with those patients in mind, not my personal enrichment, not what my image looks like, et cetera. No, just a client, a clinic that would focus on the patients. And so I did. I started a couple of years ago, getting very carefully choosing board members and people who had a very similar outlook within Orlando and other locations. We built the clinic, the board together. We opened last August with an intern and a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed mental health counselor who sees some of the patients. The intern sees other patients, and we're just continuing to move forward, looking for additional volunteer clinicians and front desk people and more interns so we can continue to help people even more.
And the name Beacon, why did you use
Beacon
that?
Health. Yep, it's Beacon Health Inc. And you can see our website at www.beaconhealth. That's all one word, BeaconHealthInc. So beaconhealthinc.com.
But the name Beacon, why did you choose the name Beacon?
Oh, so I mean, it's a little like ham-handed, right? Like, because we wanted to show the way, right? Like, I didn't know for many, many years, I didn't know the way. I didn't know how to get rid of this horrible feeling I carried around with me all the time. These feelings of unsafeness and of terror at times, of fear and trepidation, even though I wasn't even in a dangerous space at that point, right? So I needed someone to show me the way, and that's my intention with Beacon, is to show others the way.
I like that. Okay, everybody, I don't want you to think that Joe is slow or sad all the time because you do RV camping, you do karaoke, and you like to be out in nature. Okay.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. And those are all the self-care things too. Like karaoke fills my heart up.
Yeah.
Digging in the dirt, doing some gardening fills my soul up. Like camping, being around nature. Like I love that stuff. Yeah. These are serious topics. And I probably do come across kind of serious, but generally I'm a super free loving guy. And I absolutely love people and I love my life. And I'm so grateful to all of the teachers that I've had and the counselors and the therapists that have really shown me a better way to live life. Yeah. And I'm living that now.
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Joe. Oh, do you have any last words for anyone?
Just, if you find any of this that hits your heart, if you feel like you're in these kinds of situations, or if you just need help or someone to talk to, please give us a call. We're happy to help you. We're open Mondays and Tuesdays right now, 5 to 9. Um, if we can't help you, we'll find a referral. We'll find someone who can help you. But really, if some of this hits you, if some of this really is touching you and you feel like this is describing me, don't sit with it. Like you could be better 6 months from now, a year from now. You could be on a completely different life voyage if you just reach out and ask for help. And we're here to provide it if you need it.
Give the website one more time, Joe.
Sure. That's beaconhealthinc.com. That's beaconhealthinc.com. And you can also you can find us for Beacon Health Inc. on Facebook and on Instagram, LinkedIn. We've got all sorts of ways that you can get a hold of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Joe. I
Thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me. Yeah, thanks for having me, Pod. It was so good to see you again. It's been a while, so I'm so glad to see you're doing this, and this is so awesome. I love that you're engaged in this, and I'm happy to support you in any way I can.
Thank you. And we'll see you next on the next podcast. Take care, everyone.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.